as you get bigger on projects and you're kind of like working through like how much am I modeling, where's the detail that I need, how sharp are my bevels, how loose are my bevels, all that stuff. It becomes important to kind of think about rendering right from the beginning, like what details are you going to need. So at any point, if you set up your Nuke stuff, you could simply fire off a rendering, jump into Nuke, and then update it, and then see what your stuff is going to look like. That's, again, one of the great things about it. Like Photoshop, or unlike Photoshop, you don't have to go through and recomp everything. You simply render, reload, and then you can see the result of it. And then you can tweak as needed, okay? So I'm going to show just some thought process about how you would go into this, what we would attack. We're not going to go, like I said, as deep as mine was, but I still want to show you some of those things so you can utilize some of the skills. So I'm going to go to a new camera here, and actually I'm going to save my scene as, yes, number trace. All right, so in my specific scene, I have a light that is right there in front of him. I was seeing the front of him was kind of dark, so I added a light right there. You'll see that it's rounded. This is the same Arnold light, area light, this one here. The only difference is that I changed the light shape to a disc. And then I believe I adjusted the spread so it was 0, so it's much softer. Okay, I think that's what I did there. And then I also turned the visibility of the light off. So sometimes you may want a light to be visible. You can turn that to 1 and the light shape will actually be visible. Keep it at 0 and then it will not render. And then obviously the intensity is cranked up a bit. So that was one light that I had there. I'm just going to throw this onto a layer and hide that. This is also a light. You can't really see that clearly from this, but this red means that I've converted this piece of geometry into a light. So under Arnold, under lights, you can say mesh light, and it'll actually take that piece of geometry and make it into a light. You may want something to illuminate. That's how you would do it. And then what Maya will do is it'll take your object and it'll make a light underneath it. And then if you go to the attributes for it, you'll see here's color, here's intensity. So you can go through and tweak those same settings that you would have pretty much on any light. Okay. Use with caution. You don't want to have like a million lights. Sir.
Does using the lights from it make the surface itself colored with that light, or no?
Yes. So it's going to take that surface and just use it as like a glowing bar. So it wouldn't be like if the bar was black, the black is going to glow. It would just be like the bar is gone and there's just a white light there now. So it would like illuminate these areas. That make sense? Yeah. Okay. I also have a light right here. This is my main light shining on him. The size of our area lights will dictate the sharpness of our shadows. So a small area light will mean that there are sharp shadows. A bigger area light means there's softer shadows. Okay. So that's my main light. And then this up here is just my other light, just to kind of help light it up from this direction. And I believe they're pretty much all like this is 5,000 on that, and there's no other settings. And then this one is 2,000 right there. Okay. Lots of times in your scenes you will have multiple lights going on, and I also believe I have an HDR. Yes, I do, right there. Okay. You'll have multiple lights in your scene. When they did like Nemo, they had like hundreds of lights all over the area to give the lighting they needed for the scenes. Okay. So don't think that I'm going to get one light and that's going to be good enough for my environment. Typically, you're going to add one light as your main light, another light as like a bounce light, another light as maybe a fill light, and you might have multiple bounce lights, multiple fill lights, and so on. Okay. Now the HDR, we did not go over that. So I went to Arnold Lights Sky Dome. That makes a sky dome, just like I showed before, just a blank light. And then on the color for this, I clicked on the map. And then I went and found, oops, sorry, I should probably just do that. Make sure I grab the right one, 21. So I'm going to break the connection here. I'm going to click the map. I'm going to say that I'm going to bring in a file. and then I'm going to go to the folder, and I'm going to find mine. You want to keep all of your stuff together, so I'm going to show you where to download HDRs from. Typically, you want to put them into your source images folder because Maya will automatically go into the source images for any files you're bringing into the software, okay? Mine I keep in a separate spot just because I have so many. 21, there we go. And I'm going to open that, and then it brings it in, okay? So there's my HDR. Now the purpose of that HDR is it's going to help light up the scene. In most environments, even if you're in a studio, you're taking a picture of something. It's not like the entire room is black and you have this one light shining. Typically you have like curtains and lights and reflectors and all this other stuff going on. Free HDR. Okay, so you go to Google free HDR, you get HDR Haven, and you can download free HDR images under here. And then these are all the different kinds. So for something like this that's mechanical, you want to avoid skies or outdoor or nature or urban or night, okay? Typically studios are going to give it the best lighting. Now what these are also going to be used for is to help reflect stuff into our object so that we have something that resembles an environment for it, okay? So each one of these, you'll see this is what the HDR is going to look like. And then each one of these down here is a sample of what that rendering would look like, this image on that item. This is transparent, this is just a matte white, this is reflective, and then this is a reflective or a shiny blue, okay? So you can go through and find one of those. Oops. There's also a website called HDR Labs. They make a program called SIBL Archive. And this one also has some different samples of HDRs. These are just environments. You scroll down further, you can get different lighting setups here. You go down further, you can get these promo packs. Here's more, here's more, here's more, here's more. Okay. And then there's also a program called HDR Light Studio that you can download and use for free to generate your own HDRs. Okay. So if you wanted to light your stuff yourself and create the entire HDR map, you can do that as well. Think of like a realistic 3D car. Something like this. Yes, yes, yes. Something like this. This highlight that's along the door and is along this area, that is in a specific spot to emphasize the curves of the car. That's why that's there. Same thing on, I'll find a really good one, like that one. There you go. Same thing here. You can see how the light is like running around here. If there was too much light on top of this, you might lose this because the whole thing would just get washed out. So you're going to have areas where it's darker, areas where it's brighter, and so on. So HDR Light Studio, you can watch a video on this. We'll get more into it later in the semester. But basically, this is my HDR, and I click, and then I can add lights. And like I want a light right here, or I want a light right there. And what's neat about this too is you can actually load in a model. I'll load in the car. And this is my tester for where this is rendering. So this gradient is my starter background. This is my light. As I move it around, let's say I put it here, you'll see how it changes the lighting on the car. And what's even cooler is I can actually come up here and say I want this light to be right there. And you can see how it picked it up and like put the light in the position it would need to be right there. Okay, and then you have very similar settings as far as brightness goes and opacity and so on, okay? Again, we'll get more into this, but I just want to show it because I think it's a really cool program. Okay, I've also started a collection of textures for myself. I've started a collection of HDRs. So as I download something and I use it, I put it into my textures folder. That way, as I need like a wood, I don't have to go out in the internet, find a wood. I already have like 4 or 5 different woods I can pull from, okay? Same thing with HDRs. As I find one and use it, I save it into my folder, and then I can just use it over and over again. So this one looks like this. So you can see there's a couple, flash umbrellas here. Same thing on this side. And then there's actually, if I just isolate this, we can isolate that. Why don't you work isolate? There you go. You can see there's also like a camera that's like right in the center. I'm assuming that this camera was the one that was actually like recording this HDR. The way that these are shot is they would, let's say we're going to do an HDR. I want to put something right on this table and make it look like it's in this room. I would take photos all the way around 360 degrees. I would angle my camera up, take more photos around 360 degrees, angle my camera up even more, get that, and then do downwards as well. I would take multiple exposures. So I would take like a regular, like this looks good. Then I would take something that's very bright, and I would take some stuff that's very dark. And by slamming all of these photos together into this image, we get a high dynamic range image, which is what HDRI stands for. And then we can use that to actually light up our environment, okay? So typically for your stuff to look nice, you want an HDR in there for at least portions of your lighting. Not the whole lighting, but portions of it. So on mine, whoops. There you go. So on mine, I have my intensity set to 0.25 because I just wanted to give a little bit of a filler. If I cranked it up to 1, I was getting way too much light in the entire environment. I really wanted to be able to focus it right in on that, okay? So I've saved this. I'm going to delete all my lights. There we go. Delete this light and that light there. And I believe I'm back to where I was at the beginning. Yes, okay. So I'm going to also go into my render settings, and I'm going to turn some of my settings down. These sliders here are your quality settings. So as you're doing test renders, the worst thing you can do is say that you want to see it at the full res because it's a test. The size of it doesn't matter. The quality of it really doesn't matter at this point. We simply want to see the realism of, or the lighting and textures on our stuff. So I'm going to take these down to like 2, 2, 2. That's good there. And then I'm going to make sure that my size here is something small. So 960 by 540 is a plenty good size for me to work with. I'm going to render it. Oops. All right, one more step, and then I can render it. I want to take all my stuff and make sure that I have the default material on. Lambert. Lambert 1 is always your default material. I'll render it, and I should get nothing. Okay, there's no lights in the scene. Nothing's happening. I just want to verify it before I continue. So now I'm going to drop in an HDR. So I'm going to go to my Sky Dome. I'm going to go to my mapper, go to File, go to here, find number 21. Sometimes you'll find 21, like in this case, 21 may be okay, but 22 looks better. It picks up more reflections and so on. Sometimes you have to find a different HDR and you'll get better lighting in your scene. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to close this, and then I will render again. And I also have depth of field on apparently, so let's switch that out. Do I have depth of field on? Arnold. There you are. Enable depth of field is off. There we go. Okay, so there's my default rendering. Ideally, I want this to be quick. This is actually a bit too slow to be a test render. Okay, so I'm going to close that. I'm going to go to my render settings. I'm going to cut this down even further. So let's say 680. I'm going to go to my renderer here and set this to 0. And then do another render. Now I want to find a happy medium between garbage and good. So this seems like a good happy medium for now. And I rendered within a second. Okay, that's an ideal lighting time setup. So now I'm going to start assigning stuff. So I grouped my items based off of what material they're going to have. It makes your job a lot easier if I can just grab a group and say this group is going to have this material on it. versus me trying to go through and click the specific items that I want to be that material and hope I grabbed everything. So I'm going to go to my dark objects. I'm going to go to assign new material. And I'm going to go to the AI standard surface. And this will be my new dark material. Name your stuff. AI 1, 2, 3, 4 doesn't work. This is the dark material, so I'm going to go obviously dark. I'm going to take the diffuse roughness up a bit. And I'm going to take the roughness here down. We'll just see what that looks like. And then I render. And now I'm getting that. So I have some very sharp highlights on here. That's what I got with those settings. Because this is low quality already, I can work very quickly. So if I wanted to test the roughness, I can just click in here and then see what that's going to look like live. Okay. As long as this is not a play button, so that doesn't update, this does update. So now I can go through and like tweak stuff. The harder the surface is, typically the shinier it is. So something like that is going to be very crispy. I could also play with the IOR to really pull up some of that, or pull that down, and now it's kind of like it's barely there. Okay, that's good. If I pull metalness up, we're probably not going to notice a huge difference between one and the other. This metalness will actually color our reflection, okay? So this right here, that's a reflection. Our lights are white, that's white, so there's not going to be anything there. If I had colors in the scene, we would see some of that color popping into that as well. Okay, and if I pull this way up to white, you can see we get this like chromey like robot guy. That's too much. All right, so let's say that he is going to be good about here. That's fine for now. Okay. Tweak stuff later. Okay, close that, close that. I'm going to go to my light material. I'm going to go to assign new material. And I like to do this pretty early on. Like after I start modeling some big chunks, I want to see what it's going to look like. So I start adding lights, start adding materials. Standard surface, new light material. Okay, and this is going to be a lighter gray. I could also introduce a little bit of color to it. So sometimes everything that is grayscale is not always just like a pure black or a pure gray. It's usually, or sometimes has a tint to it. So maybe I'll give it a little bit of a blue. And this is going to be a lighter one, so I'm going to go with a bit more roughness, a bit more diffuse roughness, and render that again. Okay, I don't like the blue, so I'm just going to hit Control-A to open the attribute editor. And there it is. So I'm just going to desaturate, and bring that down a little bit more, and then render that again. All right, so that's good. Here's my glass. So I'm going to go to new material again. This glass. On the glass, I'm going to go down to transmission, and I'm going to pull up the transmission on this. If I put holes in my surface, I have to be very careful that I don't show all the way through because I'll see nothing. But this could be a good opportunity if I do have something that I want to show off, that I do have full transparency on that item so you could see straight through it, like my lens here. So this lens is actually a glass transparent so that I can see the iris in there, okay? Versus this, which if I hid or showed that, I would just see these like plates and that might look weird. All right, so I'm going to pull that up. I'm going to give the glass a little bit of a tint. Okay, and a little bit is a little bit. I don't want to go like that because it'll be too blue. And then we'll render it again. All right, so it's looking good. You'll see my render time is increasing. The more textures I have, the more reflections I have, the slower it's going to go. Okay, but it is getting there. We see some blues and whatnot. I could also give this a, if I pull this weight up to 1, you'll see that my base color goes away. So I pull it down some, then I can give this a little bit of a color. Everything realistically should add up to a color of 1, let's say. If you took any item, like my bottle here, so much of the color information that we're seeing is coming from reflection, so much is coming from refraction, so much is coming from just actual color of the bottle. So you can't have like 5 times as much reflection without going crazy with the settings on that. So if the reflection is 5 times as much, then the transparency has to come down and the coloring has to come down in order to get that. And Arnold is great because it actually balances it really good. So even though this is set to 0.8 here, it knows that certain ones of these take priority. So it'll automatically give priority to the transmission here. I'm going to pull that down some. There. And you'll see this is where I'm like looking at it and kind of going through. I want this to be like that, where it's blue tinted. I like that. And I'm going to take the roughness down some on there too to make it a little bit crisper glass. Okay, and a good reason why we want those bevels really pull out some of that stuff. All right, that's cool. Now here's stuff that I don't like about this HDR. You can see the umbrellas are visible inside here. Okay, so I'm going to stop this. Oops, close that. So I'm going to grab my HDR and I'm going to do 2 things. One, I'm going to turn the intensity down. So I had it at 0.25 before. I'm going to leave it at that. And then I'm also going to go to the camera visibility and set that to 0. I don't want that panel in the background to be visible at all when I render. I just want nothing back there. Okay, so obviously it's much darker now. It's much more moody. Now I'm going to start to go in there and use my other lights to help fill in the data that I want. Oops, I forgot the other stuff. Let me do that first. My spheres, which are those. So this is going to be a pure glass. So I'm going to go to New Material, Standard Surface, New Pure Glass. Go to Transmission and crank that up. I'm not going to tint this one because if it's blue, then as he's seeing things, everything would be blue. So I don't want that. Okay, and you can see, this is a lower res, but it looks like we can see the iris in here. I may want to zoom in just so I can verify that I can see the iris. Now I did have to do one extra step in order to see straight through that item. I don't know why this is even a thing in Arnold. I'm sure, for some reason they have it. I can see it. But on that item that's going to be transparent, under Arnold, I have to uncheck opaque. So if this is on, you will actually get it so that it has transparency, and it's going to make me a liar. No, it's not, because I clicked the wrong one. That one. Maybe I did. No. Oh, they're both opaque. I don't know. All right, well, it's going to make me a liar, so whatever. I'm just going to uncheck both of those. But basically what it would do is it would color it like white or whatever, some random, it's not a random color, they have it picked, but it wouldn't be transparent, okay? So if you get that, you just go in here and make sure that opaque is unchecked on that item, and then you're good. Okay. So now I'm going to go to my ground. Let me assign my new material to the ground too. This is going to be the shadow matte, just like I showed before. That's good. Okay, and then I'm going to add some other lights in. So I'm going to go to my area light. I'm going to angle one about here. This one that's in right in front, that one's going to give me this nice reflection that I have like right down the center. So I know my settings were pretty high, like 2000, so I'll just set it to 2000 now. And then I'm going to duplicate this and move it up. And this one will be 5,000. Okay, getting closer. There we go. So we're going to pretend that this is good enough. This is way too bright here. reflection has a lot to do with that too, because it's reflecting a lot of that. I don't really see my ground. There is a shadow. I think I'm just too level with it. Okay, so I'm using my alpha channel mask here to see what that transparency looks like. All right, so now I'm going to go and let's take this into Nuke and play with it. So I'm going to go to my render settings. I'm going to go to the AOV tab, and I'm going to remove all of this stuff. Okay, so these are all the ones I added. I'm going to get rid of those. I'm going to go to Add Custom, and I'm going to add AO. Everything you render out is typically going to have an ambient occlusion pass and a depth pass. Okay, you typically want to have those two things because we want to be able to add depth to our scene, and we also want to be able to add that ambient occlusion contrast to the edges. So I'm going to go to the arrow, go to Select, hit Control A, click up here first, then click Control A. There we go. Go to the AOV shader, and then find inside here ambient occlusion. There it is. And that should be good. So I'm going to go back to this, hit Select, and then one of the tabs that comes up inside here, this is where I added the ambient occlusion shader. One of the tabs is the default Arnold driver. Okay? Whenever you render something, this is like what file is going to come out of this. So right now it's set to EXR. We could change it to one of these other ones, but we want EXR. And what I want to make sure is checked is this merge AOVs. Okay? When we rendered something last time, if we rendered it as an EXR, typically it would render out the ambient occlusion here and the the color here and the depth here. This will put them all into one file. That way it's much easier to manage all of our stuff. So I'm going to render this, and there it is. I can double check up here. Here's my ambient occlusion. Here is my beauty. Okay. So before I even get into like updating it, any of that stuff, or fixing any of these, I know I'm going to need to fix this. I'm going to go and save it. So I'm going to go to my rendering. Let me make sure my render settings are set up right here. I want to fix that. I'm going to give this a name, Crab Test. Okay, Crab Test, EXR, merge AOVs, single frame, all that's default. And then I'm going to say render sequence. And perspective 3 is the camera I'm in, so I'm going to say render sequence. Now what this is going to do is it's going to go through and it's going to render out that image the same way that I were to go up here and click render, except now it's actually going to save that image to my folder as it's rendering. So now it rendered it, it saved it. Now I can go into Nuke. Okay. So I'm going to go through the hotkeys with this too. There's a hotkey sheet. Take notes, lots of hotkeys in all the programs. I'm going to hit R to read in my file, and I'm going to find my crab test. There it is. Okay. Double click it. And then I'm going to hit 1 to connect it to there. All right. I could also drag the arrow, and that would also do it. If I look in close, I can see there's a red, a green, a blue, and an alpha. And then there's also this green one, which means other. So that other could mean 15 different things. So I'm going to go into, scoot that down. I'm going to go into this, and I'm going to say shuffle. So I'm going to hit tab on the side and say shuffle. Now if it didn't connect it, I can just drag this into the mix here, and it will connect it. Or I can just drag the arrows. Again, one of the cool things about Nuke is that you can just connect things how you want to connect them. Whatever is connected to the viewer, that's what we're seeing. 90% of your errors, it's not working, is because you didn't connect it to the thing you're trying to see. So I'm going to rename this shuff_AO. And that means I'm going to go to my in and shuffle out the ambient occlusion. Okay, so now that just pulls the ambient occlusion off of there. So now I can take this, hit M for merge, and connect. A goes to the ambient occlusion, B goes to my original shape. I can't see, or I am seeing this, but it looks pretty much the same. I need to change this to a multiply. There it is, okay? Now again, we might not notice a huge difference with this. This one I think we probably will, but we want to see what the results are. Another cool hotkey is D for disable. If I click on the merge and hit D, I can see what it looks like without the ambient occlusion Hit D again, now it's re-enabled. You'll see the little icon is an X, and there's no X. So now I can see this is what the ambient occlusion is doing to this. Now, if I look at this, this is way too gray. I need a lot more contrast. I need a lot more black and white. So I'm going to jump back to Maya. I'm going to jump back to my render settings, jump back to the AOVs, jump back to my select, hit Control A. Sometimes you have to click on this bar and then hit Control A. Oops. Then go and find my AO, go and find the arrow. I know this is like a million clicks, but it'll just be like second nature after 16 weeks of this. I'm going to take my, let's do a regular Arnold render here. Okay, we're looking at the ambient occlusion. I'm going to take the spread down. Make sure this is playing. There we go. And you'll see it just increases the contrast. I may want to keep the spread up. I don't think I like that. I'm going to take the far clipping down, so I'll put that at 10. That's better. 20. Oops, 5. 2. Your numbers will be different. Like, that's a good ambient occlusion contrast, okay? These areas here that are recessed should be very dark. These areas out here that are not shouldn't be. Now, I do lose a little bit there, but I'm hoping that once I turn my settings up, those grayish, yeah, you can see them, the grayish lines will actually pop in a bit more, okay? If not, I can come back and adjust this. All right, so this is good, so I'm just going to go to render and say render sequence again. It re-renders it, saves it into that same file. You can see the little progress bar happening down there. There we go. We'll go back to Nuke, double click this, and then say reload. And now we have the latest version. And we go back to this and hit 1. And now we can do a before and after. And again, it's going to look very similar because there's not a whole lot that's changed. But we'll get more into these things as we go. Yes, sir? Yes. You don't have to. I could have used the, I could have just done a merge right here and then said channel A is the ambient occlusion, channel B is this, and I want to multiply it. But as you're viewing things, I can't see what's happening here, right? I can't see that it's very obvious like how these things are connected and what's coming out. Typically, you do want to pull them out of the mix. Just because it's easier as you go into, let's say, this one, I could add a grade, and then I could tweak what that looks like pretty quickly. Yep. Typically, it's good practice just to pull it out because anyone that you're passing the scene off to, you want them to be able to see this is exactly what you did. The color is here. And then in the background, we can't see any of the other stuff, okay? So all the stuff is still there. The EXR just allows us to basically open up this folder and start grabbing what we need, okay? Some of the stuff we won't use, okay? So let's go to this again, and let's say that I wanted to add a glow to this. So I want this area here to like pop. I want to add some glow. So I'm going to go back to this. I'm going to go back to my render settings. And one of these passes should allow me to extract that information from there, okay? Now, I know what that one's coming from. I actually forgot to turn it on, what it should be coming from at least. So I'm going to go back to my new dark material. I'm going to actually pull this metalness off. I'm going to pull this weight of the reflection down some. And I'm going to put a coat on here. Now, coat, think of like a car. When they do a car, typically they're going to give it like layers of paint for the color, and then on top of it, they do a clear coat, right? The clear coat is the shiny part. That's what this is. So we have one reflection on the actual paint. Typically, it's a bit softer, so I can maybe roughen that up a little bit more. And then we have this clear coat that's going to be very shiny. So I'm just going to look at it here and see what it looks like in Maya. Okay, so we still have that. That's good. Close this. Now, one of the render passes is coat. So this will actually render out what the coat is doing in my scene. Okay, so I just add it to the mix. I go back and I do my Arnold render. Typically I'll do the Arnold render first just to make sure something's coming out, and I'll switch it over to coat, and then you can see there's where the coat pass is doing. That's like all the stuff from the coat. So then I can take this and render sequence this out. And again, I don't usually have everything on one screen. Usually I have like my other screens over here. Like even my render view will be here, and then Nuke and Meyer on this one. So I go back to this, double click, reload. Obviously it looks a bit different. Okay. Now I'm going to add a glow to this. Okay. If I add a glow to the whole thing, it looks horrible because the whole thing is glowing. We can play with the tolerance, and I'm assuming we'd be able to do a pretty good job of isolating that anyway because those are the brightest spots, but we're going to pretend for this example that it's not doing that. Let's say, is it raining? Pouring. Wow. Let's say it's coming down in buckets. Let's say that we had an item that was, in this case, let's say these blue pieces here or whatever. We wanted something to glow and the tolerance just wasn't cutting it. We needed to be able to pull that out more, okay? So I'm going to use this in coordination with that. So if I go to my glow here and I go to my width channel, you'll see that I have coat listed red, green, and blue, okay? So let's go and look at what coat looks like. So I'm going to look at this, go here, and say coat. So what color is this? Well, I want this part. White, which is actually what colors? Everything. It's red, green, and blue, right? So there's equal values of red, green, and blue. That's why it's white, okay, or some shade of gray. So when we look at, let me put that back to RGBA. When we look at using this glow and using this width channel and using coat red, green, or blue, it doesn't matter which one we pick because all three of those are exactly the same, okay? Look at each one of those as a mask in Photoshop. Okay, I need a mask of that area. That's what's going to give it to us. So now I've used that coat red. Few Good Men, anyone? No? I'm way too old apparently. All right, so now I can pull this tolerance at any level and you'll see that nothing else is going to glow except for anything that's on that coat layer. Because it's saying, this is where the bright spots are, this is where I want it to glow. And now I can really control like the brightness of the glow, the size of the glow. You know, typically you don't want to go too crazy, just a little bit is good. And so on, okay? So I pulled that out. Now we're going to pretend too, like what if I don't know what passes are here? Besides me clicking one on this and going up here, I see AO, I see coat, but what else is there? Like, what do they look like? And I don't want to have to click here and then click there. I want to just see everything. So I'm going to hit nothing selected and hit tab, and I'm going to go to contact sheet. Layer contact sheet. Yes, yes. Then I'm going to connect this to the main one and then view it. And then this will give you, this is what your beauty pass looks like, this is what your AO looks like, and this is what your coat looks like. Now I know what the names are, but someone might not know. So I hit show layer names, and now we can see it says AO, it says RGBA, and it says coat. Okay. Now I'm going to jump back to here, and let's see what else we can do. I'm going to add in some other ones. So I know diffuse is one that I'm going to possibly want to use. Shadow matte, I believe I want to use. Specular, I know I want to use. Transmission. And I'm going to grab all three of these shadows. And I'm also going to grab these cryptos. Okay? Now you might say, just grab everything. You don't need everything, so why do it? Basically, I grab like all the stuff that I think I'm going to need, bring it into Nuke, and then I can start whittling away at what I don't need. Okay? So I'm going to transfer all these. I know what they're going to look like sort of already, so I'm just going to hit render sequence. At some point, I probably should have saved this. This will take a little bit longer, but not much, okay? The cool thing about render layers is as it's rendering, it's already calculating all these things along the way. So it calculates the diffuse, the specular, the reflection, and it puts all those things together. So all we're doing is saying, don't get rid of that. I want to have that as a separate thing to play with later. So now I can jump back into here, double click this, hit reload, and watch our contact sheet. Boom, there's a whole bunch of stuff there. Okay? Now, look at each one of these as masks. That's what we're looking at, okay? So don't worry about, why is this one so green and yellow? I don't know what to do with that. We'll play with those more. But look at the masks on here, and that's what we would be utilizing. So there's the diffuse. You'll see it's very boring looking. It's just plain. Shadow doesn't really show anything here. I think if I hit A, nope, I don't see anything. Here's the specular. There's the transmission. Here's my shadow mask, and here's my shadow matte. Okay. Now, this is something a bit more advanced. So again, we're going to go into that level of, you don't have to do this part, but eventually we will. So you may want to practice it now. I'm actually going to rebuild this rendering, using those passes. Okay. So I'm going to shuffle, and I'm going to do the same thing. So shuff, diff. And I'm just going to copy this and paste it, and paste it, and paste it, and paste it. There we go. So this one will be spec. Make sure you double click because it's single clicking doesn't work. This one will be coat. And this one will be shadow. And I'm pretty sure I'm missing one. Transmission, there we go. And then this one will be trans. There we go. Okay. So none of these are connected. So I'm going to grab these and connect them to this. Now, it's getting incredibly messy. One of the things we don't like is what, Noah?
Organization. Well, we want organization.
We want organization. We don't like messiness, okay? So I'm going to hit the space bar so I can full screen this, and I'm going to clean this up a little bit. This is getting too much. I can't see where everything is connected. Spam. Thank you. Just abandoned it over there. All right. So I'm going to slide this one over here. This I'll usually leave. The whole time I just leave that there. Anytime I need to reference it, there it is. Okay. This is our beginner one, beginner pathway. And then over here is going to be the advanced pathway. So I'm going to click, I'm just going to click over there and just type in dot. And I'm going to connect all these to dot. And then dot will get connected here. And then these get nicely laid out there. If I was solely judged on how well I organize my node graph, I would never get yelled at for being messy. There we go. Okay. Okay, that's good. All right. Now, a little step further, I'm going to hit Control. This allows me to add dots to each one of these. So I'm going to be a little bit OCD here, and I'm just going to organize these like this. I'm going to add a dot node right there, and then connect this to this. Now you have to, at some point, understand that this is all the exact same thing. You don't need to be there. This, that, and that. There we go. Beautiful. Okay. That is exactly the same as me connecting each one of these to that. Okay? There's nothing in between. The dots are just like a pass-through. That's all it is. Okay? As long as the arrow goes here, here, and then splits off into these, everything is good. So now I'm just going to merge these together. So the diffuse wants to be on the left. And then, these in the wrong order. There you go. This. It's not going to matter for the end result, but OCD Sean wants to fix that. There we go. And it will snap, so if you're extra OCD, it will snap. There we go. All right. So now I'm just going to combine these two. Okay, so let's look at what the diffuse looks like. Oops, I didn't pick these, I just called it that. There we go. So that's diffuse. Let's go to specular, and this will be specular, and then go to coat, and this will be coat. And go to trans, and this will be transmission, and go to shadow, and then this one will be shadow matte. All right, there we go. So this is diffuse, just like if I had no reflection, specularity at all on it. This one is the specular. So if I had just specularity, reflections, and whatnot, this is going to be the combined version. That's the combined version. Now I'm going to take this and I'm going to merge this with the next one. So now we've added coat. I think that's already pretty close, isn't it? Oops, we're just missing that transmission. That's it. Merge this again. There's transmission. View it. There's that one. There's that one. And you'll see there is no difference between the two. Okay, so I'm doing 1 and 2 to toggle between the before and after. You'll see there's no difference. Okay, if I were to zoom in, I might see a pixel that flickers like right there. But for the most part, we're not seeing anything crazy. That's probably because I haven't put the shadow in yet. Let's look at the shadow. That's what that looks like. So what's wrong with that? It's coming from the bottom, but let's just say I add this in. So I just merge that in there. That's what the shadow's doing.
It's doing the opposite of what you want it to do.
The opposite, right? So if you want to do the opposite, what's it typically called in every other program? Invert. Yep. So we just go to invert. We just slide this invert in here. And then we don't do an over, we do a multiply. There we go. Okay, so now let's do a little 1-2 action on this. Okay, so we do have a little bit deeper shadows in here, a little bit brighter there. Okay, now the benefit of this is we have 100% more control over every one of these passes than we did a minute ago. Okay, because we've taken all of these and separated all this stuff. Slide that down, slide that down. I can go into, let's say, the diffuse, or actually the trans. Okay, so we see how blue this is. Maybe I want that to be a bit brighter. So I'm going to go into the end result. I'm going to click in the middle here and hit G, and then just drag this grade after trans. So the trans is going to be graded and then joined in. Now as I pull this up, you can see how I can tweak what that just transmission is doing. If I go into my coat, put this here, I can go into the coat and I can pull down this and control what that coat is doing as well. Okay, I can also go into, I'm going to delete that grade, go into the grade for this and pull the mix down. Oops, I can't pull the mix down. That doesn't work. I'll just go back into here and I'll adjust it a different way. I'm going to go into my gain here. And if you click on this color swatch, it brings up all 4 of these tabs. Oops, I guess I don't want to do that either. Go back to 4. Oh, there you go. I want to adjust the gain. That's the one I want to adjust. So I can make it brighter or make it dimmer. Okay, so interactively, much quicker than we were inside Maya, we're able to tweak all of these settings. Okay. Now let's go and add Z. I forgot to add Z depth to this. So I will go to the top where Z is and drop that in. I'll show you a couple other ones just so you can tell your friends that you know all about these. I will save my file and that will render sequence. And again, because we're using Nuke, everything is updating. So all I have to do is it's saved, I go here, I go to the very tippity top, and then I reload, and everything updates. Okay, let's go to the contact sheet and see what the new passes look like. So we should have a Z, which is right here. For whatever reason, they call it Z, but it's actually named depth. Okay, now you can't see anything happening. I'll need to adjust that. There's my AO, there's the coat. What was the other one I added? Normal and position. So if I go to, there it is. This one right here is my position pass. This actually writes out the X, Y, and Z position of every pixel. So like that pixel is exactly here in the X, Y, Z. This is my normal. This is the direction that the surface is facing. Later on, we'll use more normal map stuff. Points to, oops. Position to points, there we go. I'm going to connect this to that. I'm going to view it, oops. And I'm going to choose what is my point and what is my normal. And then I'm going to hit F. And I'm going to be wrong. No, I'm not. There he is. So now this is actually a 3D representation of my rendering of a 2D image, okay? So when they did District 9, one of the things they had was they would have these aliens and they were running across these fields. And they would need to figure out, like, okay, well, we have this 3D element and we have these 2D elements. We want to make sure they're in the exact same spot. So they were able to render out their 3D stuff and figure out their exact position in 3D and drop in these like little smoke cards of every time they hit the ground, little smoke would fly up. So this is much quicker than me going into After Effects and trying to line up the smoke and then make sure that it moves in the right spot. Oops. Apparently my hotkeys have not been set correctly. I'm going to go to my preferences real quick and viewer, liar, appearance. They really need to work on this. Their other stuff obviously is confusing too, but this is really confusing. Somewhere in here is my Maya hotkey. Scope, script, viewer. Well, that should be right there. Arrows, deep arrows. They removed it. There it is. Maya. All right. So this will give me my Maya controls back instead of the Nuke ones. There we go. Okay. Now, what's kind of neat about this too is that, remember, it only renders from the front. We didn't see the back of this, so the actual, like, the back of this is like see-through. So anything that didn't render is actually just like transparent. Okay. Now, they also used it in that movie. That movie was basically like the playing ground of the area where they're really testing and building a lot of these tools. We could actually create a light inside the scene and add more lights to our environment with this. So I could actually create a 3D light in Nuke, drop it on the item, and it would light up my character past Maya. So it's pretty cool. Just that's a bonus feature. Again, you can tell your friends about it. All right, so let's go back down to our glow here. Okay, this part is the same. So this right here gets you to basically right there. All of that to get you right here. But then you can tweak stuff. So if I was doing this, I would go to Shuffle, and I would shuffle out the Ambient Occlusion. Oops. That doesn't look like Ambient Occlusion at all. What did I do? I broke it? It is because of the invert. So I said invert all, I just meant to invert the RGB. There we go. All right, so I would just invert that, and then I would just merge this here, set the multiply. Okay, so now essentially this merge right here is the same as that merge right there. Okay, so everything else would be the same from there. So here's my glow. I'm going to add in my depth of field. So I'm going to add in Z to focus. And for now, I'm going to disable the glow, okay? The order that we do things matters. So if I were to add a glow to this, and then I did my depth of field, what's going to happen? You don't know because you've never done it before. But it'll blur areas that are glowing, and areas some of the areas that are not glowing, it wouldn't blur. Okay, so we want to do the glow after the fact. So this is my Z to focus. I need to choose my depth channel, so depth.z. Look at all the different passes we got. It's crazy. I'm going to choose my math as direct. And then I'm going to just move this focal point around. Now what I should see happening is that focus plane right there. That should be updating. So that's basically like what's in focus. Okay. Now I could have done my depth of field inside of Maya, but then that means me tweaking a lot of stuff and constantly going in there and moving sliders and then rendering it and then seeing what happens. And then if I screw up or I want to animate it or anything, I have to redo the whole setup. So this, I'm going to slide this to about there, and then I can adjust my depth of field, and then I can adjust my blurriness sizes. There we go. I'm not sure why this is so pixelated under here. That's kind of weird. I guess it's just how that's rendering, so I'll have to adjust that.
Still because the resolution is low on the
It probably is. It's just weird how grainy that one is compared to the top of that, but whatever. Was it here? Yeah, it was still there. So it must be just reflecting something, and that's what's causing it. But now look at that. So right there where that focus point is, that's crystal clear. And then as we get further out, that's fuzzier, right? That's the idea with that depth of field. The more depth we have, the more we can kind of push that. So if my character, like he has an arm, right? So you could have the arm is right there, our camera's up here, and we're seeing the bottom of it blurry, and that arm is crystal clear in focus, right? So think of that too, because this is, again, as we're setting our stuff up, I may want to have a lot more depth of field. I may do this and say, I really want to add a little bit more depth to the scene. So that might mean that I change my whole camera angle. I might change where I'm putting my details and all of that stuff. Okay? Cool. All right, so just that, this part here, will give you a good foundation to be able to start playing with some of the stuff that's inside Nuke. Now, again, a little bonus thing that we will be getting into are these other passes that are kind of crazy looking. So let's go back to this. These bright ones here, crypto material, crypto asset, and so on. These ones require that you download a plugin called Cryptomat. You go to, I think I have it on the server. You can Google it too. You download the plugin and then you install it into a very specific area. So users, your name, and then .nuke. And then you just drop these Cryptomat plugins right in there. So you download this thing, you extract it, and then you just drop these things in here, reboot Nuke, and then you get this little plugin here. And I'll show you the reason for it, okay? Oops, click that. So right here, let's say I wanted to adjust the coloring on just this one panel, not all of them, but just that one, whatever reason. This Cryptomat will allow me to do that, okay? So if we look at this, this one here is called Crypto Material. This one, it's hard to see. It says Crypto Asset. This says Crypto Asset. One of these is Crypto Object. Where are you at? Right there, okay? This one is Crypto Object. And if we look at it, we'll actually be able to see some different shades, okay? So it's hard to see, but this blue is different than that blue, okay? So I'm going to go to here. I'm going to say Cryptomat. There we go. And I'm going to drag this onto this piece of footage and then hit 1 so I can view it. So right now this is, oops, let me close all these other windows and then double click that again. I'm going to go to my picker and it should allow me to pick, and I had this problem before. Let me drag a dot node out. I don't know why it didn't work before, but it's being picky about it. Cryptomat, there we go, view this. Mat output. Nope, you should be working. Oh, object, there we go. I didn't pick object. Now, you'll see it's like a different color, that doesn't matter. I'm going to say picker add, and I'm just going to control click. And what that does is it will pick those items right here. Okay? Now, they are all the same item. When I was in Maya, those 5 panels or 6 panels are all the same item. Let me just jump in here real quick, close that, close this, click here, and I'm going to say mesh separate, and then hit 3 so they're smooth, and then render that again. Now, of all the stuff that we do, CryptoMatte is the only thing that will not automatically update if we start adding new stuff into the list. If we change the name of something, it uses the name as the color as what it's picking. So sometimes you have to repick that. So I'm going to go here, reload, go back to my CryptoMatte, and clear this. There we go. And then I'm going to use my picker. Now all of these are different colors. There we go. And then I can just control-click that one. Now what this gives me is an alpha channel, a mask for that. I'm going to uncheck that. And I'm going to hit A, and now you can see I have a mask of just that one item. So now if I wanted to tweak what that one item looks like, I'm going to, I'll just do it right here. It's easier to do it right there. I'm going to add a grade node right there, view the grade node. Let's say I just go crazy on the stuff here. Oh, that's too crazy. Can't see anything. There we go. So super bright. I'm going to go to the grade, and this little mask right here I can drag to that. And now it'll only affect the item that was inside of that yellow area. Okay? Let me reset all these back to default. So 0, oops, 1, 0. That was apparently not the default. Oops, that one should be at 1. There we go. I'm going to go to gain and then just slide that. There we go. So in this case, it's not really doing a great job, but you can see how I can isolate it. This area here is where we would get more use out of that. Because if you look, there's a little bit of blue there. There's a little bit of blue there. So if I was to use this grade, pull that off, pull this off, right here, oops, not right there. Wrong program. Right there. Nope. There we go. Now that's blue. And now when we go to the end result of this, you'll see that that dark blue isn't affected by all the other stuff it was being affected by before. Okay? So, put that back to where it was. I'm going to put the glow at the end of this. There we go. Okay, so now you have at least a beginner's understanding of some of the stuff for Nuke. Have it all set up. And then over here we have these. Now again, if you want more stuff, you can add more stuff. I'll add more things as I go. The same stuff I added in the previous one where I added a background to it and added a shadow and adjusted the reflections. I would add all of that stuff too. If you ever find like something isn't working, one of the sucky things about Nuke is that it doesn't always save everything the way you think it would. So like as you're working, you would think you'd be able to update stuff like at any point, and it doesn't work. The more merges you add into this chain, you start losing stuff along the way. Because as you merge these two things together, then this other node just like dropped off. Like you can't get to those masks anymore. So way down here, there. I'm going to take this to 1/32 to make this go a little bit quicker. There we go. Okay, so way down here, I wanted to adjust the grading on the mask, but I didn't have a mask to do that, okay? So what I did was, I did the crypto way up here, and then I just used a copy node to copy it in, okay? And K is the hotkey for copy. This is what I'm copying from. This is what I'm copying to. And then I give it a name. So on this one, this is the alpha channel for it. On this one, I want to move it to something else. So if I go to new, I can say copy this to robo.mask. Create a new layer, yes. Okay. So now when I go here and I added a grade node, and I go to, I'm just going to adjust, make this red. Now I can go here and choose robot.mask, and it'll only affect that area. So sometimes you'll see that you have to, make this a little bit messy, making a crypto way up here, copying it into this mix down there, and then continuing along. Okay. As we get closer, I'll go more into this, but I just don't want to, do all of that yet. Cool. Questions? No?